Hey everyone, Chesburger here. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be taking the total drama characters and putting them into an apocalypse scenario and seeing who would come out on top and who would unfortunately die. I've gathered about 100 characters, all that have competed on at least one season of Total Drama. Certain characters like, DJ's mom or like, Dakota Zoid don't count because, they're kind of just like side characters. They're just off to the side. And Dakota Zoid is just like, a mutated version of Dakota. And so that also includes like, Commando Zoe since that's just like an all personality of Zoe. I also decided not to put Chris and Chef into this really because I feel like Chris would just die in an apocalypse scenario like just really quickly because these people, if like the certain apocalypse going on that has some sort of level of intelligence, they might want to take out Chris for all the things he's done, and then Chef would probably just like win every single time, and it would just be boring to have those characters constantly included. So I didn't throw them in here, but we have about 100 people in here. As you can see, Bowie's there on the bottom. You can't really see him, and we're gonna do a random number generator, see who is patient zero. Let me kind of explain. So, like I just said, patient zero, we're gonna do a random number generator from 1 to 100, and unfortunately, that person is gonna be patient zero, the first person infected. And then this theme, I forgot to mention the theme, is going to be zombies. So just to start off, because I actually plan on doing multiple of these, and why not start with zombies? So the tiers are going to work like this. So here's the first like little big tier kind of thing. So who would survive for a few days or just roughly a few days? And then there's three different kinds of unfortunate demises that they can experience. One is just they die from a zombie, they get infected. One is from a raid from like people survivors trying to get some more supplies, and then they have to go raid other survivors' houses for or bases whatever to get food. And then who would die of natural causes, so like maybe old age or just dehydration, hunger, and stuff like that. And that keeps up going. So we have a couple weeks, a month, 3+ months, and then eventually the people who will survive and make it out alive. So let's get started. I'm gonna go do the random number generator first, real quick. We got 83. Let's go find 83. So I calculated the square here, and it's 11 by 11, or no, 9. So this is 99. Bowie's 100, so we got to find 83. So I'll be right back. And 83 is Ennui, which is actually kind of fitting because he's, the goth kid. That actually makes a lot of sense. All right, let's begin. So starting off from a few days, I think probably Crimson would eventually jump in, so she'll just say die from zombies. She'll because of Ennui's there. Because I think depending on who characters get infected, that'll also affect like certain characters who would die first. Leonard would easily die first. Same with whoever that I don't care what her name is. Did anyone remember her name is? I don't know who her name is. Um, Ronnie's kind of a big guy. I think he might survive a few days. Let's see, Junior. No, the old men are definitely gonna. Not, I'm gonna say natural causes. I think they're somewhat. Nah, I think they can get killed by zombies. Um, who's next? I think Ezekiel. I'm gonna say he dies from a raid. I feel like he's a country boy, so I feel like he'd have some knowledge, but then like some people would come to his farm and then just kill him to get some supplies because that's kind of resourceful. Max definitely getting wrecked by zombies. He's gonna make some dumb invention that's gonna cause him to get killed. Hmm. Stacy dead. Beardo more than likely dead. I mean, he could make noises to distract the zombies. Nah, he's dead. He's definitely gonna go. Tyler 100% dying because he's stupid. He'll try to protect Lindsay, and that kind of brings her into it. Dakota definitely getting clapped. Sugar would try to put up a fight, and then she would die. I think the same thing for Topher. The vegans probably would also die here too. Anyone else for a few days? Mom and daughter, they're rich, so I think they'll stay cooped up in their house. The police cadets would definitely do well here. Um, I think no Chase. I think he would try to film some YouTube video, and then he would just get killed by that. From that, I should say. Justin's pretty, so like maybe those zombies will ignore him because there's always with total drama. There's always some bullshit that happens where the characters live. Katie and Sadie definitely not making it past like a day or whatsoever. I think the adversity twins would also go here. I just don't see them getting any farther. Anyone else from a raid? I think the stepbrothers would build like a cool base, but then like people would realize how dumb they are, and then they would just get merged that way. Father and son, I think would do okay. Who else would get clapped? I think everyone here might survive a few. Oh no, wait, Dave. Yeah, he's dead. I think he gets clapped from a raid. No, I yeah, I Z is dead. There's he's he's dead, and I think that's it for this group. I think these guys move up to the next tier. All right, so now we're to a couple weeks into the apocalypse for zombies. I do think that Owen would eventually die because his fat ass would get uh, slow down and whatever. But I do think Noah would survive because he's skinny, so he's fast, and Owen would probably sacrifice Noah for Noah or whatnot. I think Rodney would eventually die here. I think he could because he's a big guy, so he's strong. But I feel like at some point he's gonna slip up and lose. I think the nerds would. I would say they get clapped in a raid. The rockers are definitely dying here, no question. Kevin and Derry are definitely getting wrecked. Blatantly 100% getting wrecked. I don't even know why. She probably would die in a few days, but I feel like she has some hierarchy, so she would survive just off of pure bullshit. I think no, the haters or daters would do pretty well here. I don't see them. Zoe would do very well. I think Dawn eventually dies. I think she's hiding up in the trees, and then she would, survivors would just ransack that place, and then yeah, she gets clapped. I do think eventually. So for someone who would die of natural causes, I think it'd be Millie. Just because she's smart, but I feel like she'd be too chicken to go outside, and then like Priya would do well, survive here, but I think she would Priya would come back, and then like she would be dead of natural causes, and then there's not much she can really do. Lightning would definitely get clapped eventually because I mean he's strong, but he's really perky, and that would eventually get him killed. I think Amy would try to get Sammy killed, but then ultimately that backfires, and then she's dead. But then that means Sammy would also more than likely die. I'm gonna say natural causes. I think she would just get too chicken to go outside. Ella, her singing's not gonna get her far at all. She's a goner. I think Cameron was he's smart, so he could. Yeah, I think Cameron might be okay. These two, the fashion bloggers, they're definitely dead. Sam definitely dead. Actually, no. His video game knowledge might come into some strength there at some point. I think the ice dancers would definitely get clapped eventually. Same with the Wayne and Raj. I think they're dead because they're just stupid. Damien would be too chicken. I think he gets clapped in a raid. Ripper would eventually get killed. Yeah, the Brody would definitely get killed at this point. MK, no, I think she's good. Emma would definitely get clapped eventually. Um, Bowie, no, Bowie's living. I think Nichelle would eventually get killed here because her Hollywood stuff is not gonna get her too far. Because I mean, I guess in season two now she's more of a actually does all that kung fu stuff, but it would eventually get her not so far whatsoever. I do think Sierra and Cody would eventually get in a situation, and then Sierra would sacrifice herself for Cody. I believe Beth is eventually dead. I don't see her getting past a couple weeks. And I think the same thing can be said for Bridget. She's just whatever. Yeah, same thing with Jeff. DJ would it be too chicken? I'd say he dies from natural causes. He would just be too scared to go outside. I oh Anne Maria, yeah, she's definitely dead. I believe eventually Brick would get. I think he dies in a raid. He does a good job defending, but it's not worth. It's not enough, and then that's how he dies. And I think eventually Justin would die from the zombies because his attractiveness won't get him that far. And I believe mom and daughter would eventually get absolutely invaded by the zombies, and then they'll just die from there. Maybe even a raid. They might get killed in a raid because they're rich, so people would see that as a prime spot for supplies and everything. And I think that's it for the couple weeks. All right, now we're at a month. Who would get through a month? I think the father and son would get into a situation, and then the dad would sacrifice himself to his son because he loves him. Whenever I do think that MK would eventually die here. I think she would just slip up somewhere. I could see her going all the. Actually, no. I think she might be okay. Trent is dead. Eventually, Cameron's got to go. I just don't see him getting this far. Um, I think no, as Axel would do well. The police could. I would say MacArthur and Sanders would get into a really tough situation, and then MacArthur would sacrifice herself for Sanders because she's just that loyal. I do think eventually Scott would get killed, probably in a raid though. I don't because I do see him doing well against the zombies, but I feel like a raid is ultimately where he's gonna unfortunately get killed. I do think Alejandro would also eventually. No, he would survive much longer than a month. The daters would definitely get themselves into a scenario where um, they're arguing and whatnot, and then eventually Stephanie dies from a zombie, and then Ryan would eventually die because he loves her and wants to I guess see her or whatever. B, he's smart, but I feel like because I don't think he's physically disabled, but I feel like eventually he would get overpowered by the zombies and will die. Noah, I think eventually guy dies. I think from a raid though, because he's smart. He'll stay cooped up in a house somewhere. Mike, Mike does have all of his personalities, but I feel like he would slip up and eventually die. I'm gonna say he also dies from a raid. Sam would eventually die. His video game skills finally coming to an end here. I think Emma and Kitty would eventually go here, but yeah, I think they'll get clapped in a raid. I think Priya would eventually slip up, and I'm gonna say in a raid is when she dies. I think Junior will eventually, unfortunately die. It's kind of sad, but that's just what it is. And I think, and probably there's one more person who would make. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, it's gonna be Cody. I don't think he'll get clapped by zombies or a raid. I think he'll just, die of natural causes. He just can't find any food or water, and then that's how he goes out. All right, we're at the final mark, the final tier for who would get to the 3 months and ultimately who will survive. Courtney, I think, eventually die. I'm going to say in a raid. I think she would hold up pretty well, but eventually she will um, pass away because She always has like she's always trying to one up everybody, and I feel like that perfectionist attitude eventually is where she slips. I would say Gwen eventually die. I'm gonna say she dies in a raid. I don't think she'll die from the zombies. Caleb would probably also eventually die. He'll try to help someone, and that will get him killed. MK probably gets dies in a raid. I would say Bowie eventually dies from the zombies. I don't think he can get insanely far. Same thing with Julia. I think Bowie would screw over Julia real big time, and that's what gets her dead. Alejandro, he's always like so close yet so far. He would die. I would say Sanders would eventually die. I mean, again, she could go all the way and survive, but I just don't think without MacArthur, she's definitely a bit stubborn to work with anybody else, and then that's how she would go out. Same with Sky. Would say a raid is where she gets killed. Duncan, no, he would do all right. I could also see. I would say Lashana eventually dies. She'll be like at the last like maybe a few days of the apocalypse, and then she'll um, unfortunately meet her end. I'm going to say no. Scarlet would. She's smart, so she'll probably build like a high tech base or something. Zoe, Harold. Yeah, he's. I don't think he's surviving zombies. I think he gets killed in a raid though. I don't really see anything else from that point out. Scary girl. I think she gets herself just in a scenario where it's just pinned really bad on her. So like she'll just get into a crowd of zombies. She'll kill a lot of them, and then unfortunately one sneaks up behind her and kills her. And anyone from natural causes, maybe Scarlet. Maybe she's not best physically or based on combat, but I don't know if she would be able to make it out of a sort of zombie. As maybe I don't know. I think she lives. And there you have it, folks. There's and here and there you have it, folks. There are survivors for the zombie apocalypse for total drama characters: Heather, Duncan, Eva, Izzy, Joe, Zoe, Jasmine, Scarlet, and then these two are pretty obvious, but that's always there. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. Feel free to disagree if you believe that maybe someone else could have survived or maybe someone could have died a little bit sooner or later. I'll see you guys in the next one.